The moment Aaliyah Grant walked into the Seoul Broadcasting Center, she knew something was off. She had been on live television before, plenty of times. She had sat across from sharp-tongued hosts, navigated trick questions, and smiled through passive-aggressive compliments about how well she spoke English for someone who looked like her. She had learned to armor herself, to walk into any room with her shoulders squared and her chin high, because the world had taught her early that no one was going to make space for her. She had to carve it herself. But this time, the air inside Studio 7 felt different, charged, like the silence before lightning finds the ground. The show was called Vision Korea, a prestigious business talk program that aired live every Wednesday evening to an audience of roughly 4 million viewers across South Korea, with another 2 million streaming internationally. Getting booked on Vision Korea was not a small thing. It meant you had arrived. It meant the country's most powerful business minds considered you worth their attention. Aaliyah had been invited to speak about her company, Grant Elevated, a luxury skincare brand she had built from a single rented kitchen in Atlanta 8 years ago into an internationally distributed brand with retail partnerships in 12 countries, including South Korea's Lot and Shinsegae department stores. The Korean market had embraced her brand with a loyalty that still moved her when she thought about it too long. She had not expected it. She had hoped for it, worked toward it, but the moment it became real, the moment she stood in a Lot Beauty flagship store in Myeongdong and saw her products displayed alongside global luxury names, something deep inside her had exhaled for the first time in years. She deserved to be here. She had earned it. Her publicist, Jae-young, walked beside her now through the long corridor toward the green room, both of them clicking against the marble floors in their heels. Jae-young was Korean-American, sharp as a tack, and had been the one to negotiate the booking. She had briefed Aaliyah thoroughly, the format, the host's style, the general direction of questions, business growth, international expansion, the Grant Elevated story. "You look incredible," Jae-young said, glancing at her sideways. "That dress is perfect." Aaliyah had chosen deliberately, a deep burgundy wrap dress, tailored so precisely it looked painted. Gold jewelry understated but unmistakably real. Her locks were pinned partially up, the rest falling loose and magnificent down her back. She had sat in the makeup chair that morning and made a quiet decision. She would be completely herself tonight. No softening, no shrinking, no adjusting her volume for the room. She had spent the first half of her career doing that. She was done. The green room door opened and a production assistant, young and wide-eyed, bowed slightly and gestured inside. Aaliyah stepped in and stopped. He was already there. Han Do-yoon. She recognized him immediately. Anyone in global business would. He was the chairman and founder of Hansung Group, a South Korean conglomerate with holdings in technology, real estate, shipping, and luxury retail. Forbes had listed him in the top 40 wealthiest people in Asia for the past 3 consecutive years. He was known for 2 things equally: his extraordinary business instincts and his extraordinary ruthlessness. The Korean press called him the cold architect. International media preferred the man who wins before the game begins. He was standing near the window with a glass of water, speaking quietly to a man in a dark suit. He was taller than she had imagined. Broader. The photographs she had seen did not fully capture the way he occupied space, not aggressively, but completely the way a mountain simply exists without asking permission. When he turned, his eyes found her immediately. Dark, still, and assessing in a way that should have felt rude but somehow did not. He held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds longer than was comfortable. Then he looked away and returned to his conversation. No greeting, no acknowledgement, nothing. Jae-young appeared at her elbow. "I didn't know he was going to be on the same episode," she murmured, her voice dropping. "The producers didn't disclose the full lineup." Aaliyah set her bag down on the green room sofa with perfect calm. "It doesn't matter," she said. "We're not here for him." She believed that completely. She had no reason not to. The show opened with the usual fanfare, bright studio lights, the theme music that South Koreans of a certain generation could hum in their sleep. The host, Park Sung-jin, sweeping his arm toward the audience with the seasoned ease of a man who had been doing this for 20 years. He was warm, quick, funny in the way that put guests at ease before he asked the question designed to unsettle them. There were 3 guests that evening: a tech entrepreneur, a food industry pioneer, and then the 2 of them, Aaliyah and Do-yoon, positioned at opposite ends of a sleek white panel desk with Park Sung-jin at the center. For the first 20 minutes, everything was fine. More than fine, actually. Aaliyah was electric. She spoke about Grant elevated with the kind of precision and passion that only comes from having lived something completely. From the failures, the near bankruptcies, the shipping delays, the retail buyer who told her in 2019 that ethnic skincare brands don't have mass market appeal in Asia. She told that story with a smile, and the audience laughed with her, and she watched the translation scroll across the lower screen in Korean and felt the energy in the room shift toward her, lean in, the way a crowd does when they recognize something true. Park Sung-jin was nodding, clearly delighted. And then he made a choice. He turned to Do-yoon and said, with that polished smile still on his face, "Chairman Han, Grant Elevated has recently approached Hansung's luxury retail division about a possible partnership. As someone who has reviewed the brand extensively, what is your assessment of its long-term viability in the Korean luxury market?" The question hung in the air. Aaliyah had not known about any formal approach to Hansung's retail division. Jae-young had been in talks with a subsidiary, yes, but nothing had been confirmed, nothing had been disclosed. She kept her expression composed, her hands still on the desk. Do-yoon set down his water glass. When he spoke, his voice was even, measured, a voice that had closed 1,000 deals and walked away from just as many without flinching. "Grant Elevated is a competent brand," he said, "with a compelling founder narrative, but in my assessment, it lacks the structural foundation required for luxury positioning in the Korean market. The pricing model is inconsistent, the brand language is unclear, and frankly..." He paused, just briefly, just long enough for the pause itself to become a statement. "The image may not translate." The studio went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a considered moment. The tight, awful quiet of a room full of people who all understood what had just been implied and were now watching to see how the woman at the other end of the desk would survive it. The image may not translate. 4 words, wrapped in the clean language of business, but anyone watching, and 4 million people were watching, understood exactly what had been slipped inside them. Aaliyah did not flinch. She did not blink. She looked at Han Do-yoon directly, and he looked back at her, and for one long moment nothing moved. Then Park Sung-jin laughed nervously and reached for his notes. And Aaliyah smiled, slowly, deliberately, and said, in a voice so composed it was almost frightening, "Interesting. I'd love to hear more about what image you think doesn't translate." The audience held its breath. And somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, "Don't cut away. Do not cut away." The silence that followed Aaliyah's question was the kind that makes television history. Park Sung-jin had hosted Vision Korea for 22 years. He had interviewed presidents, controversial CEOs, disgraced celebrities making calculated comebacks. He had navigated scandal, tears, shouting matches, and one memorable episode where a guest had walked off set entirely. He thought he had seen every possible version of a live television moment. He had never seen anything like this. Han Do-yoon looked at Aaliyah with an expression that was difficult to read. Not surprise exactly. Something quieter and more complex than that. He tilted his head, just slightly, and when he spoke his voice carried the same controlled precision as before. "I meant exactly what I said. Luxury in the Korean market is built on legacy, on heritage, on a very specific visual and cultural language. Grant Elevated does not yet speak that language. That is not a personal observation. It is a market reality." "A market reality," Aaliyah repeated. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing something genuinely interesting. "And who decided what the language of luxury sounds like in Korea? Who set those parameters? Because from where I'm sitting, the Korean consumer has already answered that question differently than you have. My retention rate in this market is 68%. My customer referral rate is among the highest of any international beauty brand that entered Korea in the last 5 years. The people you're suggesting cannot decode my brand's image have already bought it, loved it, and brought their sisters back to buy it too. A ripple moved through the studio audience, not loud, just present. Do-yoon's jaw shifted slightly. Numbers at the entry level of the market do not constitute luxury positioning. And dismissal from someone who has never used the product does not constitute a credible review, Aaliyah said, still smiling, still completely still. But I appreciate your perspective, Chairman Han. It's useful to understand the ceiling other people have already decided to put above you. Helps you know exactly how far above it to build. The applause started before she even finished the sentence. It was not thunderous. It was the specific kind of applause that means the room has chosen a side, not out of blind loyalty, but out of recognition. The audience had watched something real happen in front of them and responded the only way honest people can. Park Sung-jin, sensing the shift, leaned in with the practiced instinct of a veteran host. Ms. Grant, you have built Grant Elevated entirely independently, no investors, no inherited capital. Walk us through the moment you almost lost everything and what brought you back. And Aaliyah turned away from Do-yoon and answered the question. And for the next 12 minutes she was so compelling, so precise, so quietly devastating in her command of the room that 3 of the production assistants watching from the side of the studio stopped moving entirely. She did not look at Han Do-yoon again. She did not need to. But here is the thing about live television that the audience at home does not always understand. The camera catches everything, including the things the subject does not intend to show. And in the minutes that followed Aaliyah's response, the director, a woman named Choi Hyun-ah who had been doing this job for 15 years, made a quiet, deliberate decision to cut, several times, to Han Do-yoon's face. What she captured was not what anyone expected. He was watching Aaliyah, not with the detached, evaluative expression he had worn before, with something else, something that had no clean professional name. His eyes tracked her with the concentrated attention of someone who has encountered a problem they genuinely did not anticipate and finds themselves, against all expectation, more interested in the problem than in being right. Hyun-ah saw it through her monitor and felt the specific instinct that separates good directors from great ones. She kept the camera on him for 3 seconds longer than was standard. Social media noticed within minutes. By the time the show's closing segment began, the clip of Do-yoon's face, that unguarded, searching expression fixed on Aaliyah while she spoke, had already been screenshotted and posted and reposted across Twitter, Instagram, and Kakao Talk with captions ranging from analytical to outright gleeful. But none of that reached Aaliyah immediately. What reached her, the moment she stepped off set, was Jae-young's face. Jae-young had 2 expressions, calm professionalism and controlled panic. The one she was wearing now was neither. It was something Aaliyah had never seen on her before. What happened? Aaliyah asked. The clip is already viral. What he said, what you said back. Twitter is, it's a lot. Some of it is incredible. Some of it is, Jae-young exhaled. Some of it is calling it racist, which, to be clear, I think it was. But the Korean media cycle moves fast and we need to. I need 10 minutes, Aaliyah said quietly. Jae-young stopped. Of course. Aaliyah found a bathroom at the end of the corridor, went inside, locked the door, and stood in front of the mirror for a long moment. She was not going to cry. She made that decision cleanly, the way she had learned to make hard decisions, not by suppressing the feeling, but by locating it precisely and choosing what to do with it. She knew what was underneath the composure she had held on that stage. She had felt the moment Do-yoon's words landed, had felt the old familiar weight of being assessed not on what she had built, but on how she looked while building it, had felt the audience's silence as both witness and verdict. She had survived it, more than survived, she had answered. But surviving something and being untouched by it are different things, and Aaliyah had long ago stopped pretending they were the same. She washed her hands, looked at herself in the mirror, adjusted one earring that had shifted slightly. Then she unlocked the door and walked back out. Han Do-yoon was standing in the corridor. She almost stopped. She did not stop. He turned as she approached, and there was a quality to his stillness that was different from what she had seen on stage. Less armored. She could not have explained how she knew that. She simply did. "Ms. Grant," he said. She kept walking, chairman Han. "I owe you an apology." That made her stop. She turned to look at him. In the corridor's quieter light, away from the studio, he looked less like a magazine cover and more like an actual person, which somehow made him more, not less, striking. There was nothing performative about him here, no audience to manage. "What I said was poorly worded," he continued. "It created an implication I did not intend, and one that I am not willing to stand behind." Aaliyah studied him for a moment. "Poorly worded," she said. "Is that what it was?" "No," he said, after a brief pause. "That is the diplomatic version. The honest version is that I said something I had not fully thought through in a public forum, and the result was something I would not have chosen." "And what did you not think through, exactly?" He held her gaze. "The way those words would land on you, specifically, not as a category or a brand or a market variable, on you." Aaliyah said nothing for a moment. She was looking at him the way she looked at a new formula, searching for the flaw, the place where it would break under pressure. But she found something unexpected, not performance, not calculation. "That's a more honest answer than I expected," she said finally. "I tend to be honest when it is inconvenient," he said. "It is one of my less commercially useful qualities." Something almost shifted in her expression. Not a smile, the ghost of one. "Your publicist is going to want you to make a statement," she said. "My publicist is going to want me to do several things in the next 24 hours, Do-yoon said, "most of which I have already decided not to do." "And what have you decided to do?" He looked at her for a long moment, and whatever she had expected him to say, it was not what came out of his mouth next. "Something I have not done in a very long time," he said quietly. "The right thing, even if it costs me something." Before she could ask what he meant, his phone rang. He glanced at it. Something crossed his face, not quite decision, but the moment just before one, and he looked back at her. "I will be in touch, Ms. Grant." He turned and walked away down the corridor, and Aaliyah stood there watching him go with the uncomfortable, electric feeling of someone who has just heard the first line of a sentence they desperately need to hear the end of. She went back to Jae-young. "What did he say?" Jae-young asked immediately. "I honestly don't know," Aaliyah said. She slept badly that night, not from distress, exactly, from anticipation. The kind that comes when something has shifted on its axis and you don't yet know what the new position means. Her phone buzzed at 6 a.m. with a message from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. There were 3 words, and a time and an address. The words were, "We should talk." She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she got up, went to the window of her hotel room, and looked out at Seoul in the early morning, the city catching light, the Han River silver and steady in the distance, and she made a decision she could not entirely explain. She typed back, "I'll be there." She had no idea that in approximately 18 hours, the entire world was going to be looking at her again. This time, for a completely different reason. The address was a private dining room on the 38th floor of a building in Gangnam that did not advertise itself anywhere. No sign at the entrance, no listing online, the kind of place that exists entirely through invitation, through the quiet network of people who have enough money that discretion becomes its own luxury. A concierge met Aaliyah in the lobby, nodded once, and escorted her to an elevator that required a keycard she was handed without explanation. She almost laughed, almost. The room was simple in the way that only extremely expensive things manage to be simple. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread below like a circuit board come to life. A single table set for 2. No staff visible, though she suspected they were close. Han Do-yoon was already there. He stood when she entered, a small gesture, automatic, the kind that lives in a person's bones rather than their manners manual. He was dressed differently than the night before. Dark trousers, a simple charcoal shirt with the collar open, still immaculate, But the armor was adjusted, slightly less formal, deliberately so, she realized. He had thought about what to wear to this meeting. That told her something. "You came," he said. "I said I would," she answered, setting her bag down and taking the seat across from him without waiting to be directed to it. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the table in the full morning light, and Aaliyah thought there was something almost absurd about the situation. 20 hours ago, this man had implied on national television that her face was bad for business, and here she was in a room that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a month, looking at him, while Seoul glittered 40 stories below. Life, she had learned, was almost never linear. "Before you say anything," she said, "I want you to know I didn't come here for a deal. If this is about managing the narrative from last night or a partnership offer designed to make the story go away, I'm not interested. I have a lawyer and a very good publicist, and I am more than capable of managing my own narrative." "I know," he said. "Then what is this?" Do-yoon leaned back slightly and looked at her with that same quality of attention she had caught on camera the night before, focused in a way that had nothing performative about it. "My mother built a business," he said. "Not the Hansung Group. Before that, when my father was still alive and they had very little, she made and sold handmade skincare products from our apartment kitchen in Busan. She was brilliant at it. She understood skin the way some people understand music, intuitively, completely. She had a customer base that was fiercely loyal, women who would call her directly, who trusted her above any brand." Aaliyah said nothing. She was listening with her whole body. "My father died when I was 11, Do-yoon continued, and my mother could not get a single bank loan to scale what she had built. Not one. Every institution she approached found a reason to decline. The business was too small. The market was uncertain. The documentation was insufficient." He paused. "The real reason, which no one said directly but which my mother understood perfectly, was that she was a young widow with 3 children and no male guarantor and nothing that looked, to the people making decisions, like the image of a serious entrepreneur." The room was very quiet. "She eventually sold the formulas to a larger company for a fraction of what they were worth because it was the only offer she received. That company made millions from those products. My mother made enough to keep us housed for 2 years. He looked at Aaliyah steadily. "I built Hansung partly because I never wanted to be the person who needed something from a closed door. And last night, without thinking, without examining what I was actually saying and where it came from, I became the person standing at the door deciding who looks right enough to enter." The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind that comes after something true has been said, and both people are taking it seriously. "Why are you telling me this?" Aaliyah asked. "Because you deserve the full explanation, not the diplomatic version, not the press release." He met her eyes. "And because I have spent the last 9 hours looking at what I have actually built inside Hansung's retail division and realizing that the blind spots I claimed not to have are, in fact, enormous." Aaliyah exhaled slowly. "That is a very significant thing to admit." "I am aware. Most men in your position would have issued a statement through their communications team and flown home. Most men in my position do exactly that," he said. "I found I couldn't." She studied him. "Why not?" He didn't answer immediately, and when he did, his voice was slightly different, still measured, but with something underneath it that had not been there before. "Because the way you looked at me when you answered me last night, not with anger, not with performance, but with absolute clarity, I realized I was looking at someone who has never once needed my validation and came to that stage as a complete person regardless of anything I said. And what I felt, if I am being completely honest, was not the satisfaction of someone who has made a sharp business observation." He paused. "It was shame. Which is not a sensation I am particularly accustomed to." Aaliyah looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother's formulas, do you know what happened to them?" Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, quickly composed. "The company that bought them was absorbed into a larger group in the late 90s. The products were eventually discontinued." "Her work disappeared." "Yes." Aaliyah nodded slowly. Mine won't, she said, not as a declaration, simply as a fact, the way someone states the temperature of the room. And something happened to Han Du-yoon's face in that moment that the controlled, armored, twice-photographed chairman of Hansung Group would probably never have allowed in any other room, in front of any other person. Something opened, briefly, completely. He said, very quietly, no, it won't. They talked for 3 hours. Not about partnership terms or brand positioning or market data. They talked about Busan and Atlanta. About what it costs to build something from nothing when the world has already decided what nothing looks like on your particular body. About failure, which they had both experienced with enough depth and specificity to make the conversation entirely real. About the loneliness of being at the top of something you built alone, which is different from regular loneliness, the way a cathedral is different from a room. The scale makes it echo. At some point, food arrived, and neither of them remembered ordering it. At some point, Aaliyah laughed, genuinely, openly. Her whole face involved. At something he said about a disastrous early business meeting in which a translation error had led him to accidentally promise a Japanese partner his firstborn child. And Han Du-yoon looked at her laughing and did something he had not done in recent memory in the presence of another person. He laughed too. Not the polished social performance of it, the actual thing. When she finally stood to leave, it was early afternoon, and the city below had shifted from morning silver to midday gold. What happens now? She asked, not romantically. Practically, she was a practical woman. I would like to see you again, he said, standing, unhurried, looking at her directly. Not for business, or not only for business. I am aware that is an unusual thing to say given the last 24 hours. It is a very unusual thing to say, she agreed. I find I am less concerned with unusual than I used to be. She picked up her bag. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, she said, your mother sounds like she was extraordinary. His jaw tightened just slightly. She was the most capable person I have ever known. Then you know exactly what that kind of woman looks like, Aaliyah said. Which means last night was not who you are. It was who you forgot to stop being for a moment. She left. He stood at the window for a long time after, watching the city, thinking about the distance between the person you build yourself into and the person you actually are when something real is standing in front of you. That evening at 7:14 p.m. Korean Standard Time, Han Du-yoon posted directly from his personal account. No communications team, no pre-approved language, no strategic framing. The post contained 2 photographs and a paragraph of text. The first photograph was old. A woman in a small apartment kitchen in Busan, smiling at the camera, bottles and jars arranged on the counter behind her. His mother, 1987. The second photograph was from that morning. Aaliyah Grant, mid-laugh, Seoul's skyline behind her, completely unaware the picture was being taken. The text read, Last night I said something on live television that was wrong. Not poorly worded. Wrong. I implied that a woman of extraordinary capability and vision did not carry the right image for success in a market that she has, in fact, already conquered. I said it without examining where that assumption came from or what it revealed about the limitations I have allowed to live unchecked inside institutions I control. That ends now. Hansung Group will be announcing a full structural review of our retail partnerships with a specific focus on equity in how we assess and support international founders. The details will follow. But I want to say something else, separately from all of that. I met someone this morning who reminded me what it looks like when a person builds their life from complete integrity. I am grateful. The world should know her name. By midnight, the post had been shared 400,000 times. By the following morning, every major Korean news outlet was running the story. International media picked it up by afternoon. The phrase, Han Du-yoon's announcement, was trending in 7 countries. But buried inside the media storm, something quieter was also circulating. A short video clip, posted by an account that turned out to be Han Du-yoon's personal assistant, who would later claim she had acted entirely on her own instincts. The clip was from the morning meeting. 30 seconds. No audio. Just the image of two people at a table by a window, the city below them, deep in conversation, leaning toward each other the way people do when they have forgotten there is a world outside the room. The caption said simply, "He told her she didn't have the right image, then he introduced her to the world." Aaliyah saw it on her phone at the airport, boarding her flight back to Atlanta. She watched it twice. Then she put her phone away, settled into her seat, and looked out the window at Seoul growing smaller below her, this city that had given her a store display and a public wound, and unexpectedly, the rarest thing she had not known she was missing. A witness. Not someone to rescue her. She had never needed rescuing. But someone who looked at exactly who she was, the fullness of it, the history and the fire and the quiet and the capability, and said without flinching, "I see this. I am telling people." 3 weeks later, Han Do-yoon flew to Atlanta. He did not announce it. He did not bring a team. He took a car to a neighborhood in the West End and stood in front of a small building that was now a Grant elevated distribution center, and he looked at it the way a person looks at something they want to fully understand rather than simply own. Aaliyah met him at the door. "You found it," she said. "I did research," he said. She tilted her head. "Did you do research on me or on the address?" "Both," he said, without apology. "I told you I tend toward honesty when it is inconvenient." She opened the door. "Come inside." He did. They have not made any public statements about what they are to each other. They have not needed to. The people who pay attention to such things, and many people do, have noticed that Hansung's restructured retail equity program has Grant elevated as its founding partner. Have noticed that a certain Korean chairman has been photographed in Atlanta twice in 6 weeks. Have noticed that Aaliyah Grant, in a recent interview, when asked what she had learned from the Vision Korea moment, smiled in a way that contained something the interviewer could not quite name and said, "That the right person, in the wrong moment, is still the right person. They just need something real to remind them." The interviewer asked her to elaborate. She shook her head, still smiling. "Some things," she said, "you have to earn the right to understand." And that was all she said. Which was, as it turned out, more than enough. The end. Life teaches us that humiliation, when met with dignity, does not diminish us. It reveals us. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it also reveals the person who caused it in ways that change them completely. The most powerful thing you can do when someone questions your image is refuse to adjust it. Stand in it. Build higher from inside it. Let the world catch up to what you already know you are. Han Do-yoon learned that a closed door says nothing about the person knocking. It only ever speaks about whoever decided to keep it shut. And Aaliyah Grant already knew what every woman who has ever been underestimated eventually learns. You do not need the door. You are always capable of building your own.